everybody, and thank you for joining the Be Women Solution weekly webinars, where we connect to share, to learn, to get inspired to action. In these webinars are a unique moment, an opportunity to reflect, to reimagine our future, to discover our authentic selves. So I'm Laura Jadoro-Koch, founder of Be Women, passionate about using the markets as a force for good to address the issues of gender and climate change. And today we're going to talk about a topic that is very, very dear to everybody in this group of Be Women. The topic is an accounting revolution. Can ecofeminism save the planet? And Delphine Gibassier, a professor and a passion about this movement, will talk to us, and our moderator today is Laura Palmeiro, another passionate woman about sustainability from the UN, senior associate of the UN Global Compact, senior advisor. So on this, let me just mention what is Be Women, Be Women Solution. Who are we? We are a global network of entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs that seek to balance purpose and profits in the markets toward a caring economy. An economic system in which we genuinely care for the well-being and fulfillment of people and respect and responsibility of our environment. And a few more seconds, the Be Women Empowering move is to put your shoulders back, your chin up, your eyes that with a beautiful gaze that twinkles with joy and determination, and with a super wide smile. Laura, as moderator, the line is all yours.
Okay, thank you so much. A beautiful introduction to the movement that you have created. So I will just introduce myself very quickly because it's not about me today, it is about Delphine and her work. And so my name is Laura Palmeiro. I'm a senior advisor to the United Nations Global Compact. I have a very long background in finance. And the last 10 years, I have mostly worked on sustainability, and namely on how to measure sustainability. That means how to measure whether the companies are actually walking the talk when they say they're doing good to the planet, to society, and in many different aspects. So I will introduce our speaker today, who is a dear friend. And her name is Delphine Gibassier. She is an associate professor at Audencia Business School with 18 years experience in non-financial accounting and reporting. She has worked with the UN Global Compact, the IIRC, International Integrated Reporting Council, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, Reporting 3.0, the Natural Capital Coalition, and CDSB, as well as the French accounting standards setter on carbon accounting, multi-capital accounting, and integrated reporting. In practice, she has developed carbon accounting, SDG accounting, and integrated reporting for large companies and SMEs. Before joining academia, she worked as a management controller at GE Healthcare, Danone, and Syngenta in Paris, USA, and Asia. Her work has been published in leading accounting journals, such as Accounting, Auditing, and Accountability Journal, Critical Perspectives on Accounting and Sustainability Accounting Management and Policy Journal. She is a member of the Center for Social and Environmental Accounting Research and on the Scientific Committee of Environmental and Sustainability Management Accounting Network for Europe. Her research has been recognized with a number of prestigious prizes. So that is on the, I would say, the formal side of her presentation. On the personal side, she's, as I said, a very dear friend. And we have met when more than 10 years ago, I needed to put in place a carbon accounting, the first one from scratch. Nothing existed, and we needed to put in place a carbon accounting for Danone, where I was at that time a finance director for environment, trying to apply this kind of measures. I was coming from finance. I knew nothing about sustainability. And at the same time, because coincidences don't happen, and I know that my friend Laura Koch believes in this as well, coincidences put us together because Delphine needed to have a company with a case study on which build her her thesis for her PhD. She was finishing her PhD. And so she came to the non, she went to many companies and they didn't want to disclose the data. She came to the non and I said, please help me on this because I don't know how to do it. And a very beautiful friendship started like that. So with no further ado, I would like to leave the floor to Delphine to tell us about her passion and ecofeminism. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura and Laura. Both. And yes, Laura and I have worked closely together for many, many years, not only on carbon accounting, but many other things. I think we co-built the things around accounting together because we exchange on a daily basis, and that's how we make this new accounting come up and work together. And not long ago, we talked about ecofeminisms, and I said that and something about it and let's share it. So I'll share my screen right now, and then we can talk about what I've tried to do. I hope so. I'll put it in full screen. I hope you can still see the screen and you can hear me well. That's fine. Perfect. So basically, I'll do this so I can. Basically, I'm not a specialist of ecofeminisms. Probably a lot of you have read much more than I have done, but it came to my attention through one specific paper I'll introduce in a minute, and possibilities to do something about accounting. But I'm a specialist of accounting for sustainable development. I've been for the last 10 years, and my background, as Laura said, is in accounting. Right now, just to complete the presentation, I work at Audencia in Nantes, in France. I've been around the world and I've lived in the US and Asia before, but I've been back in France. I was saying that I had photos of my kids behind me, but yeah, so because of the kids mainly, we've sterilized, but we've been going around the world for a few years before that. I'm also the director of the International Research Center, Multi-Capital Integrated Performance, that opened last month, and the academic director of the first worldwide MBA Chief Value Officer, which is being presented tomorrow and is also open for people who are interested in that area and who would like to learn how to do it within their own companies. So why did I get interested in that area? We were looking for new frontiers. If you want to move accounting around, if you want to make sure that people are dedicated to build something new, you've got to push your boundaries and you've got to look at the margins, what we call the margins of accounting. And there are three topics that I found of interest in what was going on. One strand of work that I really am inspired by is accounting for sustainable development. The fact that we put for sustainable development and not sustainability accounting, like many people do, makes a huge difference to why we do it and how we do it. The Jan Bibbington, the researcher who has dedicated her last work to that topic, wants us to understand that we are not here to make sure that we account rightly for organizations' sustainability, but really for sustainable development itself. That changed a lot in how you want to make accounting work in the future. So that was one avenue that I started looking at, reading work that she has done and also work that have inspired her. And discussing with one of my colleagues based at Ivy Business Schools, we discussed two things that we thought would be interesting to look at. One of the things was indigenous knowledge, and the other was ecofeminism. Indigenous knowledge, because now we understand that they have the knowledge that we probably need to apply if we want to do a lot about biodiversity and many more things. And ecofeminism, one work intrigued me very much. In my fields in research, there is one paper, only one, from 1992, written by Christine Cooper, about how we should work with ecofeminism in accounting, and not just accounting, but green accounting. And then after that, I kind of started pulling the thread and said, I'd like to see whether this makes any sense, at least to open up the can and see what's inside, and how can that inspire future work. And I think we've got something coming, which is not too far also from things that we've been discussing in the Accounting for Sustainable Development movement. And altogether, I think it makes a strong argument for really considering something different in accounting. So I'll talk about that now. So what was it about? For me, it was finding a new horizon, and I'll talk about it in a minute, why accounting and how accounting is actually being considered. I'm trying to get the... accounting is basically very rational, very dualistic, and thinking feminism allowed to think really away, like you do not have to have dualism, you do not have to have things right away, right perfect, and you can consider accounting differently if you think about things like sensitivity, gift, openness, and mystery, and also when you think about replacing competition by cooperation relation. Another book that I was really interested about, and I'm sorry I'm citing it quite a lot, but it's a book that is written for now only in French by a journalist called Delphine, and she wrote about the history of ecofeminism, and this was also quite eye-opening for me to see whether that could apply to accounting. Trying to move to the other. And in accounting, we are looking for a wind of change. We are looking to challenge the way that we are doing accounting today, more specifically in sustainability, but not only. And one of the major researchers in accounting in the last 30 years, Anthony Hopwood, said that feminist study might be able to make some contribution to the emulation of issues, specifically linked to what we call the processes of objectification and the concepts of order and regulation that is in the accounting rhetoric today still. If you talk to a lot of standard setters, if you hear the discussion of why the environment and the social cannot be accounted for today, those items come up really quickly. And language of accounting is something that could be much wider and different if we consider this as a language to communicate. And we are communicating in an unbalanced way today, and we think we can rebalance it if we engage with femininity in a different manner. So what did just a few words about feminism and ecology, and this is very, very high level, and I'm sure a lot of you know more than I do in ecofeminism, but I wanted to take the opportunity to speak a little bit about it because it's needed to understand what are the critiques we do in accounting and what can we do about it. Basically, simply, ecofeminism comes and says there's a connection between women, life, and earth. If we take that into consideration, you totally see why sustainability accounting, or now accounting for sustainable development, should be looking at feminism as a source for a different type of accounting. Now, in between this and today, there has been different ways why feminism, women have been considered differently. We've heard that because of agriculture taking off, women were considered as sisters, spouses, daughters, so the other, somebody behind. Another source of domination has come from rationalism. This is also very connected to the birth of accounting, Or some others say that nature must be bound to service and made slave. And there are also quotes from different philosophers saying that it's the same as women. They say now that there is no solution to the ecological crisis if women are not liberated, and that the movement behind ecofeminism is a movement of contestation and social resistance. Currently, there is a new wave of ecofeminism writers, and one of them, Vandana Shiva, which you all know probably, is internationally renowned, coming from India, has also made the connection between what she calls maldevelopment and the exploitation of women, saying that work, when it does not produce profits that are monetized or capital that you can actually account for in accounting, you disappear, you are absent. And so women's work is often unproductive in accounting, nature's work is often unproductive, and you have to twist it, like the example she gives about the river, to make it productive. If the river becomes productive only if you develop a dam in order to make it become productive. On the other side, if you look at accounting, it's a discipline that disciplines and controls, right? It's hierarchical, it's either or, it enforces a kind of order with dominations where you have principals and subordinates. And yeah, the women is often suppressed. The values, the perception, the feeling, the acting of women and the feminines are clearly something that accounting is at the opposite of. So if you look at accounting today, on the left side, you are what it does, and on the right side, I've tried to give examples of what we think it should become or why it's not currently coherent with sustainable development. At the foundation of accounting, there is an economy that completely separates the social and the economic. We can still see it today in many, many interactions, including we were hearing in France, there is a debate about some of the solutions offered by a citizens' work on ecology. People say, are the solutions that they are offering economically viable? So the only way to look at this is because the economy is dominant, and instead of being considered part of society and society being part of the environment, which is what I represent on the right side. So today, the only way that we consider nature is as an externality to the economy and to accounting. And the only examples we see today, the new examples of accounting and multi-capital accounting that you see, specifically the models that KPMG, BASF or Crown Estate have built, are built on making something aside and monetizing an externality, but not trying to make an accounting that would consider nature as a possibility to integrate a different way in accounting. So it's both externalities or commodification. So we've just finished a report, and I know some of my team members are on the call today. We've just finished a report where we were looking at accounting norms and standards and how do they consider social and nature today. Most of the time, it's if and only if they can be commodified that they are entered in. So we are talking about heat and light, but you can also talk about wood instead of forest, or animals that are commodified if they are used as a good to be accounted for. Another problem with accounting in the economy today is that it's unitary and linear, where it's either, again, it's a problem of either or. And if you want to consider complex linear relationships between climate change, people dying for not having food, or people being displaced, you don't fit that into our accounting today. You don't know how to do trade-offs in accounting. You don't know how to do feedback loops in accounting. You don't know how to rewrite things, because it has to be something very stable that you cut off, rewrite, continue. It's the rational accounting rules that we live in today, but the fuzzy world that we have doesn't fit inside this. We are currently also working on biodiversity financialization with my colleague at Ivy, and we see that when people are trying to commodify a species on which they could implement an impact bond where investors could say, we are saving the world through finance, the fact that a species cannot be tamed or pacified into a commodity makes it nearly impossible to financialize biodiversity conservation. And this is exactly what we are seeing in accounting today, and that's why we are having great difficulty trying to fit in what we have outside into a world that was not made for it. And the last part is debit and credit. What Cooper says, Christine Cooper, who wrote the initial work I was interested in 1992, is that profits are masculine and losses are feminine. Often everything associated to social welfare and the COVID crisis has been very clear on who was doing the social welfare work around the world. It's like, I think the numbers in France were over 80% of the people right on the front line were women. This is exactly what she said in her 2016 paper, where in accounting, we are always looking at debits and credits, and we are signifying that the feminine is associated with something that has no value, or even that has negative value. It's also a problem because it's a binary opposition when everything in nature is multiple. It's two beaches are not the same, two species are not the same, and two birds of the same species will be not the same. It's really difficult to consider that it's has to be balanced, when in the world nothing actually balances as accounting would wishes it to do. And the last thing we hear a lot today, this is the main argument for people to monetize and include nature into economic processes, including at the level of IPCC, a level of IPBES. The scientists that are behind that are now also working on trying to find a monetary value to nature. Currently, they say it's valueless, not because it doesn't actually have value to us, but because we were not able to put it into the economy or the accounting before. And this is why we use terms such as capitals, and this is something I use on a daily basis. When we talk about the environment today, we talk about natural capital. When we talk about our colleagues, we talk about human capital. And it seems that the discourse, even at the NGO level, is only one way. You've got to put a value on nature, economic value, to be able to understand value in financial accounting. Sorry. Now, one other thing that we are looking to see is whether, instead of cramming nature, feminism, the other into the current accounting, this is what we're trying to do.
Delphine, I think we lost you, but you're still there. Okay, you're
Maybe
back. Hello, Delphine. I don't have her WhatsApp. Do you want to call her?
Yes. Don't worry. I hope she's looking at her phone. Maybe she's still making a presentation. I hope it's not the case.
She just, her internet most probably went open, and so she's going to try to jump in again. Anyway, in the meantime, I think that what Delphine was saying is really fascinating, and it's very related to what we have talked in the Be Women world about the domination society, or where does all this come from? Because it seems that the main problem of our society is that we started with the domination of how men qualify their own interests and more male type of ideas. And Rianne Eisler is one of our biggest proponent. And maybe Laura, you want to mention something?
Yes, I didn't see the presentation before she did it. We are super aligned on everything usually, but I like about the last slide that she was showing. There is a big debate that we are having around this sustainability reporting, or reporting for sustainable development, because we are working in this area, both of us. And she knows perfectly, and it will be a very good point to kick off the discussions after this the presentation about you know, not everything that we cannot put a price to doesn't matter, and it is there is a big trend within people that are super committed to these topics, working in sustainability metrics, that want to monetize everything, because their logic is, until other people, I believe that this has value beyond the fact that it is monetized or not. I am convinced, but in order for the rest of the people, in order for the system to take it into account, I need to put a monetary value to it so that I can put it into the accounts of companies. And I am opposed to that. That it must be like, of the people like you and me that work for this to be taken into account seriously, it must be like 90% of the people. And I am opposed to that. I believe that in what companies should be putting out there in terms of reporting of what they are doing, they need to put out the financial accounts, but they also need to put out a series of key performance indicators that are not reflected in monetary value, but that are referring to, I would say, the unit of measure that belongs to that specific topic. Like, for instance, number of accidents, CO2 emission tons, liters of water that they have polluted or cleaned, etc., etc. And I think that decision makers need to have a broad view, so that they can be able to work with these different values and these different parameters, and not only make decisions based on one parameter, which is money. That is how I see it, but it takes conviction and it takes a lot of thinking on the side of the people that are using the information, because they will have a lot of different parameters to look at. So I think that Delphine is now back.
Yes, she's back. Thank you,
Yeah,
Delphine.
I'm sorry. It's like it happens to you the only time in the entire COVID crisis when you're speaking to hundreds of people, but that's okay.
Exactly.
Sorry, I don't know where I stopped.
You can restart with this slide, I think, but you know what? I took the opportunity, you know that I speak a lot I took the opportunity of you jumping out to jump in and say something about how opposed I am, and you know this very well, my dear friend, to monetizing everything. Exactly. So I just made that little point. Please go continue. Thank you.
Okay. So I was presenting probably on my own that accounting could look a bit different. We can imagine, for me, it's about broadening up rather than trying to cram in. So we can imagine that there can be multiple accounts, multiple realities that are accounted for in a different way. Actually, accounting can be different. We've seen, I've been sharing with Laura the work that has been done on Buddhist accounting in Thailand, or accounting in Egypt 1,000 years ago. So accounting doesn't have to look like what we are doing today. We can just open up. We can just do something a bit different. So I was trying to show in my last few slides examples of what's happening today. We have multiple accounting. I know that's including Christine Cooper. She's opposed to looking at those as something that is a response, but still, those multiple accounts, they are making financial capital to the same level. It's when you see this, there's not one more that is important than the others. The 6 that are represented equal to each other. That's something that didn't exist 10 years ago. You can look at what life cycle assessments do today. It's not a representation of one item, it's a representation of 14 items. So you can already look at what companies are looking at. It's difficult, it's not easy. They often monetize, they often come back to the financial, that's true. But it's not impossible to work today with 6 to over 20 indicators and make the decisions with multiple accounts representing diversity of the world that you are working in when you are an organization. You can also today look for connectivity. It's really hard, and none of the current frameworks that we see, such as the one by the IRC, the Integrated Reporting Framework, are going as far as we need to in terms of looking at the interconnection. The problem is, what do you do with climate change impacts water, and water impacts production, and that impacts the social accounts that you have with your suppliers. It's not easy. And accounting is not used to making that interconnections today. But there are calls for that connectivity. And this is one of the principles of integrated reporting. I can see within accounts of organization how they are trying to be transparent about the trade-offs they are making. But if we don't go as far as to show that into accounts, I'm not sure how far we'll go into terms of sustainable development. But even when you see the representations of the SDGs today, you don't see that interconnection that well. You know, you have the wedding cake from the Stockholm Resilience Center, you have different ways of making them connect, but the most important is that connection. So when we work with Danone on their representation of the SDGs, we finished each pages with how this particular SDG was going to impact the resolution of other SDGs. It's not yet perfect, but it's a way to say, if you do something on climate change, you'll impact water and poverty and other things. Talking about local place-based also, we are often looking at multinationals. And if we want to look at sustainable development, it's very local. Biodiversity is local, water is local, poverty and many other issues are deeply rooted into systems which are local. And all of those systems needs to be considered within the context of the limits and the demands you put on that particular region or locality. That's also something that accounting does not very well today, because it rationalize and commodifies things and bring them up there so that you can throw them in the world's market capital market and exchanges, if you make it complex, if you make it and reattach it to the local, you make it nearly impossible to account for. And that's what people are really reluctant to, but that's necessary as well today. So how can we reattach accounting for sustainable development to the actual local complexity that it is representing? Next is the tensions between everything. So in accounting, you've got to have everything balanced. Doesn't work without it. That's actually one thing I really liked when I was learning accounting. I remember sitting there and said, that's really easy. That's cool. You've got to balance everything. If it's not balanced, it doesn't work. I'll get 20 out of 20. That's what I remember saying when I was 18 and looking at accounting in my first university years. But currently, all managers have to face tensions between environmental concerns, economic growth, and this is something that we also need to acknowledge. Why do we need to balance? Why do we need to have a return on investment? So when you look at volunteers, currently accounting does not allow you to count the free hours that they are giving you. They are not allowed to account for the gift of just helping each other. Why would we not look at the way that accounting could represent those? So for me, it was really to inspire. I believe ecofeminism should inform future developments of accounting for sustainable development. I'm not looking at making it the inspiration. I'm looking for many inspirations to make sure that we do change accounting, that we consider the other in the way that we do accounting. And I thought ecofeminism was one source of inspirations we could have, and that's what I wanted to share with you today. So I can open the floor to questions now, Laura, if you want.
Yes, thank you so much, Delphine. So I think we have a few things in the chat. We have someone asking, can you tell us more? Maybe, I don't know if it is about within your scope, but can you tell us more about the origins, about the domination society that is connected to gender inequality?
Well, that's what I was talking about at the beginning. There's no one source of domination and no one explanation that all ecofeminists share. But if you look at what ecofeminists have written, they often say, because there is a connection with nature and feminism, if you disconnect and if you consider nature also as something that you can dominate, you consider women as something that you can dominate. And often the domination of nature and goes with the domination of women. That's how I would simplify very much the discourse of the many good authors that I have behind me. But it's one way to consider, especially when you look at the crisis today. If you look at the impact of not only environmental crisis, but social crisis, we often see it, and there are actions at the United Nations level for this. Women are the first impacted on climate change, through poverty, and through displacement. And and the COVID crisis is yet another example that we are always the first to be impacted. And that's what ecofeminism is trying to explain. And by using what they are saying, I'm trying to see how we can change accounting to make the world a bit more balanced in a way.
Mm-hmm. Great. I think that there is another question that is quite very accounting, about accounting. How can you measure or quantify, in your view, the culture of a company when we know that in success for a company is given in many ways by the culture of it?
It's a very good question that we are talking about at the moment with Laura in our indicators. I think you've got to be open to seeing accounting differently than the balance sheet and the P&L. And if you are open to seeing it differently and looking at indicators also of change, I think this is another way of looking at accounting. Accounting is not just this, it's accountancy. It's many type of numbers and narratives that are around it. If you look at currently organizations, how they represent and talk, they talk through balance sheet, P&L, narratives in their management reports, communication through advertisement about their brand, communication to people they recruit. So the culture can also be communicated and accounted for through the way that people consider you, through people that actually don't leave you, the number of people that want to come and work with you, the strength of your relationship with your suppliers and customers, maybe the more strengths that you have in your social and relationship capital, it demonstrates the trust in you, it demonstrates the brand in a good way. I'm not saying the brand to sell more products, but the brands to be able to demonstrate the value you bring to society.
Mm-hmm. Great. There is another question about countries, and it says, how are countries given monetary value, I imagine, to nature or on GDP or GNP?
Yeah, many countries are not, and us researchers, we are very poor into looking at national accounts. There's not that many of us that have dedicated efforts to help accounting for different capitals at the national or international levels. It's often more dealt with the economists than with accountants. But there is a researcher that was with me last year at Birmingham, Madeleine, who was working on biodiversity. And she looked at the way that the UK accounted for the SDGs on biodiversity. So there are examples of things that are happening. I know a few African countries, there is a system at the UN level, and France also has been trying out a few things. But this is where probably people working on SDGs right now are quite frustrated. Many of the indicators, you have 17 SDGs, 169 targets, and many, many more indicators behind that. I don't know if you've ever been that far in looking at the SDGs. Many of the indicators that you needed for poverty, for health, were non-existent, even at the international level. Imagine asking, the national statistic bodies in each country trying to integrate that into some kind of reporting or accounting. But one thing that you can see, one movement that I would look for, which I really, really like, is the movement behind what Kate Bowers has been doing with her Do Not Economics. Maybe some of you have read her book from 2017. She's got a huge, powerful examples that she's building right now with Amsterdam. So it's not a state, but it's a city. I know Copenhagen a few days ago also said that they would use the Do Not Economics for their own future. And France latest Sustainable Development Report from 2019 has used the donut from Kate Howard for one reason, to be able to explain the trade-offs between, for example, growing more organic food and ending the problem of hunger. Sometimes you say, if we go more organic, how do we deal with people who have no food or no access to food? So they use the do not to be able to demonstrate how they deal with trade-offs and complexity. That's one way that I would look for. And Wales and New Zealand have also demonstrated that you can drive a country on well-being and without the GDP as your main target. And the crisis have also demonstrated that country like China had to deliberately stop putting GDP targets to survive. This is what we are looking for.
Great. There is a question about which countries are accounting for nature. And I think that you mentioned a few of them, but maybe you have a few more.
I don't have them at the top of my head and it's moving fast, but I know you can look at UK for sure. There's lots of works going on right now and people dedicated specifically on nature and biodiversity at the country level.
Okay, great. There is another comment/question saying GDP does not include the free and many hours of service work, or does not include the value of caring for kids or elder parents. They are key for our society. How will caring for our future citizen be valued?
Yeah, when you discuss that kind of topics, you end up having issues that you cannot. Last year I worked on a multi-capital accounting for a farm, and the farm was agroecologic, so really already had implemented a way of looking at agriculture which is different from what you have today. They had thought about their business model and had looked for different kind of suppliers to different kind of customers, and kind of already thought about the economic and the nature and the social capital. There was one other thing that was key to their model. It was their governance. In France, if you go through the normal agriculture techniques to own a farm, you can't pass it on to someone else easily for some reason. So they had built a governance to make sure that what they were building in agroecology would be transferable to other people doing agroecology and not going back to traditional agriculture. That governance, it was so important, but I had no clue how to account for it. Did we need to account for it as a positive impact of their model? Yes. Did we know how to do this? No. And it's very frustrating because what you're talking about, the caring hours, I have seen tweets. Academia is one of the industry, if I may say it that way, where women take the hit like no others. And I remember seeing it not long ago from a professor. So I'm an associate professor. Being a professor is higher up even. With a chair, someone that is considered in her field. On Twitter, she said, for the last 2 months, nobody has ever called me professor. I'm mom. You know, I'm the one doing the cakes at home. And I can't write. I don't do my research. I'm no one anymore. You know, not that she didn't like being a mom, but she was back to what we all do. She had left her professor gear at the door of COVID and was living the other part of herself fully, but not regaining what probably a lot of men have been doing. Like, we all have heard men in academia saying COVID crisis was so great for publishing. No, but this is true. This is what I've been experiencing. And when you talk to that, even to your own human resource manager, and say, what about my work for the next 2 years, because research is long-term. Don't worry, it's going back to normal. Nobody is going to acknowledge that you took the hit more than the others. Nobody is going to acknowledge the mental, you know, the what you have in your head that your husband doesn't have. And I don't know, I don't have the answer to all of this. This is something that we are also working really hard on on making a difference too. I'm sure you saw on the internet one of the it's funny and it's not funny. It was a job interview where they say it's 24/7. You know, it's gonna be really rewarding. And the guys, they were showing a few people doing the interviews and being really shocked by everything that they were being told. And after a few minutes, the guy say, "This is being a mom or a dad." And they would, and then they were, you know, they were realizing how far it goes. You never stop being that. But I told my husband yesterday, I said, you know, I can't remember what he asked me. I said, I'm not the TV magazine. I'm not the cookbook. I'm not the, look for it, do it yourself. This is the mental thing that nobody gets accounted for, and that makes us probably much more tired than a lot of other parents.
Okay, great. So there are a lot of people saying, thank you for sharing the reality about the women in academia. And you have a lot of fans in the chat now. So someone is saying that some of the things that you were mentioning for when you started talking about the culture of this enterprise that you were working with, they were mentioning it is very positive to account for that if there was any way to account, but it needs to be used for tax incentives by the governments. Or procurement contracts that favor sustainability in purchases. And that is something that we are discussing with Delphine, because we're having some projects with the Global Compact and we have big dreams about this. I'm pretty sure that you agree, and we all agree on this. It is a comment, it wasn't a question. Thank you for that. So I have another one that maybe it was targeted to me, but I think I will leave it to you, because at this stage, you know much better than me on this. How is Danone reporting on sustainable metrics accounting that is different than the standard accounting? How is the market share valuation being affected or not affected by this?
This is a tricky question. You should have taken that one. You're from Danone.
Yes, I know. But you have worked so much on this with Danone, and even in the last few years, that I think it's for you to answer.
There is still a disconnection between financial accounting and non-financial accounting at Danone, like in many others. I only know of one company that has tried to start implementing an accounting that is making the connections through balance sheet and P&L. That is Olam, and most of their project right now is still not entirely public, but you can look at what they do in their last two reports. Can you
say what is Olam, where they are based, and what is the company doing?
Olam is a food agriculture company based in Singapore, worldwide, doing palm oils. Not only, but also Coca-Cola, and I'm not sure if they do milk as well, but they have started looking at what it could look like. This is experimentation, and they are working on it, and they will probably publish more and more. At Danone, it's still separated, and at the same time, they do an integrated report. This is what a lot of companies have been trying to do in the last 10 years. There is over 1,500 reports, probably much more today, especially in South Africa and Japan, but also a lot in Latin America and Asia, and in Europe. In France, it's growing quite fast, which are doing integrated reports. While it's not yet an integrated accounting, it is one way of, like the octopus that I showed, trying to make the connection in your thinking. They call it the integrated thinking, and trying to make sure that in your decision-making processes that you integrate nature, social, and other people's thinking. This is one possible ways of going forward. Another way is, if you consider, we talked about culture, you have in France, you have a new way of looking at yourself, which is entreprise à mission, which is a little bit like the benefit corporation in the US. It's considering that the value that you create for your stakeholders, shareholders, and others has to be multiple, that you cannot think about your success only because you create more money in dividends. And Danone just voted that last Friday to become something different. That means that they will have to demonstrate that they create not just financial value, but other kinds of value. And behind that, they need to think about a different type of accounting, and probably the indicators that we've worked on in integrated reporting and in the SDG reporting that we did together will not suffice. They will have to think about a different way of showing and demonstrating their value that is even more integrated than what they are doing today. But the integrated type of accounting that people are talking about today, they think it's really easy, that you click and you do triple bottom line. It's still very experimental. And this is what we're doing with our center as well. We are experimenting integrated accounts. We are looking whether it's possible. We are discussing what we should and should not put into numbers, what should stay narratives, whether we should balance, create multiple accounts or not. There's different avenues that we are exploring. We are going to do 3 different kind of tests in the next few months. And we want not only to show what is possible, but what also needs to stay impossible. Because we've got to, after all I've said about ecofeminism and accounting, we've got to understand also that accountancy, rendering accounts to someone, does not have to be in a P&L balance sheet. It can also be completed by other stuff. That's also something we need to.
I have a last comment that is not a question, but I mean, I'm burning to to say this one because it made me kind of jump off my chair, and you will jump off your chair as well. BlackRock CEO has asked this to all the companies they invest in to have social value. Do you have any kind of comment around this?
Do I have a comment? Everyone that calls for more is welcome. Now we want also to we want to see action as well. And I don't want to be Manichaean and to say there's good and bad people here. Everyone can change and everyone can be better. And there are also good people who look good and they are not good. Okay, so just to say, to nuance the discourse, because BlackRock has been seen as not always the drive of forces for good. They are also continue to sometimes vote against certain climate change shareholder activity, including recently in France. But I would say that they have had the power to put that on the table. They are so big that the fact that they talk about it makes it an issue for everyone. That's one thing that they are doing, at least. Now, in terms of accounting, they're associated with SASB, which is in the US and represents one worldview of what accounting should look like, which is very connected to financial materiality. That means for them, when I said multiple accounting, all capitals are made equal, in SASB's world, it's not the case yet. So that's one thing that I would push against. I would want to see that a company that does more social value and maybe creates a bit less financial value is better or more important than the one that will continue to make more of financial value and little of the other ones, or just making it zero. I think creating social value, yes. Let's demonstrate how and what kind of accounting or can prove what kind of companies we want for tomorrow.
Yeah. So I am just asking for permission to Laura Koch to go on for a little bit. I have a few minutes. I don't know, Delphine, if you can, because we have 1 or 2 more questions and they are very important. Laura, ¿tenemos autorización? Are we okay?
Please go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So, so regarding, sorry, but I need to say something about this this question about BlackRock. Whenever you see, and Delphine is very politically correct, I'm a little bit less. I have been an investor relations myself, representing Danone and talking to investors, and I know the investing world quite well. What is a pity is that, you know, BlackRock is having these letters every year, just for a while now, I think like 4 or 5 years in a row. And it is, as Delphine said, is very good in terms of what they're asking for. And so they are making the market move in that sense. But they're basically throwing all the responsibility to corporates and basically saying, you see, I cannot make my reporting on sustainability because companies are not moving enough and they're not reporting enough. For many, many years now, and for many reasons and details that we could give with Delphine, but we don't have the time now, we can say that in the market, and please, Delphine, correct me if I'm wrong, that there is enough data and comparable data, thanks to CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Project, in order to at least qualify how companies have been doing in terms of CO2 emissions to fight climate change, which is one of the biggest challenges that we have today. So the people from BlackRock, they cannot say that they don't have those data, and they are very much advocating for corporates to give incentives to their own management, to their people, when they pay the salaries and have a variable place, a variable part of that salary, to have this bonus and these incentives calculated on sustainability issues, which Danone has done for more than 10 years, 15 years or so, and many other corporates as well, okay? But when it comes to them, BlackRock doesn't do that. They don't do that. And they do have the data to do that. They could do that. They could give incentives to their own portfolio managers, saying part of your incentive, part of your financial incentive and your bonus and your target bonus for the year is coming from how the companies you invested in are doing in terms of reducing at least CO2 emissions, at least. And they're not doing it. So they are not walking the talk, very unfairly. So they are starting to do some stuff, but I would just call the people in this call to be cautious about what people say and how they want to appear, and what they actually mean or what they actually do. And as Delphine said, now that they are becoming vocal about this, they are, I would say, rallying behind SASB, which has a view of the world which is totally based on financial materiality, which Delphine mentioned, but just to make it, if I may, even a little bit more clear, financial materiality looks at extra financial issues only if they can be affecting my financial accounts globally speaking. Whereas
can you give examples?
Yes, any kind of, for instance, any kind of CO2 emissions, and then Delphine, you can jump in if you have, but if you have another example, but CO2 emissions, for instance, they could be having an impact. The CO2 emissions that I have could have an impact on my accounts quite quickly this year or next year if new regulation is coming into place by countries. And so I have to keep an eye on those because I could immediately have an impact. Typically new regulations on managing the way that investors make their decisions is very much driven by risk management. So when there is any risk in the short or the medium term to impact their accounts, that is how they're making their decisions. Whereas another view of the world is the one sustained by many other actors in the markets and by, for instance, standards like GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative. And this other view of the world is, and I will let the academic correct me if the name is not correct, but it is another way of looking at the materiality. So which are the material topics, the important topics to report on? And it is, I would say, a holistic materiality that says that a company should be reporting on any topic that can be material, important, affecting all the stakeholders and not only the shareholders of the company. So this is obviously the definition of materiality to which both Delphine and myself adhere to, and BlackRock is very much supporting the other look at sustainability. So you say, oh wow, this is great, they are supporting sustainability. Yes, but they are supporting a view of the world that takes into account those things in sustainability issues, social, environment, that are going to be touching their accounts or have the risk of being impacting their accounts. So they're managing risk. They are not going further than that. That is my very blunt view. You know me, how I speak about these things, but I wanted to give them.
Who wanted to speak, but I'll just add, have you ever seen a company being stopped, failing for not maintaining its natural or social capital? Not yet. What we would want is that if you do not maintain your natural capital, you could go bankrupt. You should go bankrupt. Today, you don't go bankrupt when you destroy. This is what it is about, basically, in materiality. This is what we are looking for, in a way. Think about it in a way that you should go bankrupt if you would destroy one or the other two value creation. And maybe we can hear Hella.
One question about
we
that.
Have a question
about nature. You're talking go bankrupt because of nature. What about paying non-livable wages also? There's many companies. So why is that not happening,
Yeah, it's the same. Social capital should be the same. It's part of what we call the social foundations, or if you look at certain SDGs, if you were to account with the 3 legs or 4 legs or 5 legs, any one of them, if you were on a negative on any one of them, you should be stopped from continuing working, period.
Okay, so we have a person that is asking for to be given the floor if she can ask it live. I think it is.
She's here.
I didn't want to take time. If there's no time, it's okay. We can debate.
No, please go on.
I just thank you so much for this. I find this fascinating. I work on impact investing, and the issue of value as an integrated concept is always at the heart of these discussions. And I think, accounting is crucial for this. You've given us a sort of a framework to think about accounting for integrated value, which I appreciate as a way rather than a bifurcated kind of value. My question is, are you aware of any kind of lobbying efforts to accounting standards boards to change these type of, because essentially, if we don't get these accounting standards board on the side, it will remain kind of a very haphazard, company by company kind of effort, like you mentioned, the Palmeiro company doing it. And I think we need a more standardized approach to get everyone on board with this, because I think people appreciate that integrated value is where we're all heading. There isn't so much, you know, economic value and social value and environmental value, or even the concept of triple bottom line is actually being revolutionized, is one bottom line, which is completely integrated now. So are you aware of such efforts in your work or otherwise? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll try and be short because this is a long topic. It's both
Maybe
Laura
we
and
can
I
debate offline. I'm happy to connect offline.
Okay. No, but it's basically it's been on the voluntary side and private standard makers for standards such as the GRI or CDP for a long time, and investors have been a driving force. When you consider CDP, they have been a driving force behind transparency and data. And when I worked at Danone, I was actually doing the CDP for them, and every year we were saying, oh, that one more and that one more, and they were pushing and pushing, and it was quite hard to follow up even when you were a good company. But now for the last 2 years there's been a lot of push for that to go regulatory and to become part of the public interest part. That means and this is something that Laura has been advocating for a long time. That means that yet it's good, and we still need people to push for more experiments. It's a journey, you know. We won't go one day off the other, but there is talks about what kind of body or where could public interest type of non-financial accounting sit. And we'll have to also admit that non-financial accounting at the beginning will be frustrating, because when you go and you regulate and you lower your level because you want to widen this, you want to spread and to match a lot of people, including SMEs or companies that are currently not doing anything, and force them to do something. So it will not be integrated accounting by Olam or anything that Danone does now. You know, it's not going to be that. But the EU has already said that they would develop their own standard. That's something that is public. But there has also been discussion about other places where that should sit, including the OECD or the Global Compact for the international level, because the EU is basically just the EU. And also discussion about the IASB. This is also public. They have been pushed by some of their funders called Median, and also by Accountancy Europe, where they have made a Cogito paper where they demonstrate different ways of doing this. So with 2 branches, 1 branches, etc. So the thinking is on. A lot of debates is coming, especially because the EU making it public that they are doing means that either there is a global version that everybody can stand by, or they will push others to adopt what the EU has done. So politically, you can imagine the consequences. Not that the US is always happy to, you know, adopt things being done elsewhere. So this is really something that is this is on now. And it will make a huge difference what is going to happen at the EU in the next 6 months. So watch the space, because it will change the accounting for non-financial. It will change a lot. But we don't stop the voluntary and don't stop pushing for more, because there's a lot more to do to do something correct. Not just the regulatory, but they need to move, you know, in parallel. And to push each other to go further.
Yeah, what I truly believe, thank you, Delphine and Hella and Laura. I mean, the key thing here is incentives, because if you have the right incentives starting in a company to move forward, like you said, the right incentives at Black Dog were not given, the right incentives at Danone are given. So that makes a big difference. And also if governments give the right incentives, now the idea is to determine which are the right incentives, but I think that Europe is always ahead on that. So on this note, I would love to have Delphine and Laura just give some closing remarks. I think what is your passion? Where do you think you can go? What is it? Because Be Women, what we do at the end, we always get a pen and start writing at least 3 things that we're going to change based on this very inspiring talk you gave us, so that actually action takes place. Because many times what happens is that action is not taking place because people don't act. They see, oh, very interesting conversation, and then they move on their normal life and they don't do many changes. So we want to create 3 changes while we write those 3 changes we want to do, and people can write it on the chat. Delphine and Laura, if you can give us your closing remarks, please.
Oh, well, I will start because I want Delphine to be the last one to speak. I really feel honored and blessed by having met Delphine just by chance, as we say, by chance, a few years ago, many years ago, and because she has, I have a lot of thoughts and a lot of passion for this, but she is the one giving me the I would say the substance on everything that she's studying and she's writing. So it's, I think that in itself this conversation has been a good example of what can happen among women. We started without a goal. We had no goal, and this thing has been growing and growing over the last few years, and here we are trying to contribute to the world with new things that we are doing at the UN Global Compact that we could talk at some other point if you want, Laura, to your audience as well. So I will leave Delphine to do the last remarks.
I think it's one of the things that I always want to push, and we called it crazy ideas, but now that I have a research center, like Laura said, sometimes I try to be more politically correct. But one of the things that I still want to do, and that's the reasons why I have crazy girls in my team, which are they are on the line. They know that I also want them to continue imagine new things that we sometimes stop ourselves from imagining. Especially when I talked about ecofeminism, I'm sure a lot of people, including in my own institution, didn't imagine I would talk about that today. But it's about looking elsewhere. It's about, ouvrir les chakras, we say, really trying to make sure that you don't jump in the next accounting without having jumped on the moon or even gone on Mars. That's where I think we should go. Right now, we are looking at the new strategy of Audencia, and we are being pushed to look forward, to really look at other industries, not just about the next business school right next door. They ask us to really think about how do service industry work? How does the luxury industry work? This is what we're doing about accounting. How do Thai Buddhists do accounting? How do ecofeminism would look at accounting? This is how we are going to make it work, not just about the next, different type of IFRS. We need to have both. We need to have the regular, to have the irregular or the different, and then we can move forward. This is what I'm pushing every time we have that discussion. Let's not stop where we are.
Wow, that's amazing. So basically what you're implying, we need to have a holistic approach to accounting where we are considering indigenous, Buddhist, financial, Wall Street, all the different accountings, and then come together and with all these many constituents in society and come up with a basic ideas of what accounting has to be. And this is really beautiful. And I truly believe that what we need to push is for corporate and government radical transparency. And only through a good system of accounting we can have that. And so radical transparency will save us, save the planet, save everybody. So thank you, everybody. And all of you, you were really, Delphine, Laura, you were very inspiring. So we're looking forward to another conversation of these in the near future. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye to everyone.
Bye, everyone.